Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
The NHL regular season has cleared its first weekend, and on today's show, we will welcome the only African-American majority owner in professional hockey. As we take a spin to the ECHL, we'll be speaking with LaSonjia LJ Jack, the mother and co-owner with her son, former professional football player Myles Jack. We'll also be talking expansion. We'll be talking goaltending contracts. But first, Neil, we have three things that people need to pay attention to. And despite a Monday loss to the New Jersey Devils, the Utah Hockey Club certainly off to an impressive start.
They sure are. And they won their very first game against Chicago Blackhawks at home in Salt Lake City, and then went on the road, and not an easy road trip in the New York metro area, beating the Islanders in overtime, beating the Rangers in overtime, and then falling to the Devils. But a great start for this hockey club so far this season, and some very impressive performances by Clayton, Keller, and the rest of the group there.
And not to mention Dylan Guenther, who is the NHL's #1 star in the first week of the season. And you mentioned Clayton Keller, and in our last episode, the season preview with EJ Raddick, he was your breakout player of the year. So good job so far, 3 goals and 3 assists. And the aforementioned Dylan Guenther already with 5 goals on the season. So let's now turn over to one club that's probably overachieving, one that's underachieving, and they both play in the same province of Alberta.
Yeah, there is a surprise to the season again for the Edmonton Oilers start. They start off without a win so far this season, and their latest loss was to their rival, the Calgary Flames. You got to feel bad for them in some ways because they went out to a 1-0 lead. Jeff Skinner's first goal as an Edmonton Oiler, playing on a line with Hyman and McDavid. He found some loose change around the net. And then they score a second goal, and it's goaltender interference, it's ruled. Then they score a third goal, and that's called offside. And then Calgary got their game and got their sea legs under them, and ended up winning the game 4-1. So big win for Calgary. If you look at the other end of the ice, Calgary, who's been thought by everybody to be a non-playoff team this year, a team that's rebuilding, has had a really good start. No losses so far. So, and Huberdeau with a tremendous start to his season after 2, sort of off years for him in his first 2 years in Calgary. Now he looks like he's settled in and is playing pretty good.
And a great job by Ryan Huska really rallying this group. Nazem Kadri looks regenerated. Strong game of Rasmus Andersson last night. The goaltending with Dan Vladar and Dustin Wolf has held up so far. So look, I mean, this is a very small sample size for both clubs, but certainly not the way we envisioned the start for either of these two teams.
No, not when the one team is being picked as a lottery team, that being Calgary, and the other team is being picked as the Stanley Cup champion this year, that being Edmonton. So yes, they're going in opposite directions. But as you said, it's 3 games into the season. But it's interesting when you predict things in the off season, isn't it? It's so hard to get them right because, stuff happens, and here we are.
It does, but I think the Oilers could take a little bit of solace with the fact that they did start 2-9-1 last year, and things ended up pretty well for them in the long run. So certainly something to look out for as the season continues to roll along. And something kind of on the ugly side here, and that's the Colorado Avalanche goaltending situation. And this was another club that was expected to contend for the Stanley Cup. And certainly by the time we get to spring, we expect to find them there. However, in the first 2 games of the regular season, in Vegas and then against Columbus, Alexander Georgiev pulled twice, and his backup, Justus Annunen, not much better. They have combined for a .682 save percentage in their first two games going into Monday night's game with the New York Islanders. And they also wound up claiming goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen off waivers from Winnipeg. So this has to be a little bit unsettling for the Colorado Brass at this point.
It sure does. And you saw that the head coach came out in defense of his number one goalie, Georgiev, and said he's still our guy and so on, which you'd expect him to say. I mean, you don't want to knock the confidence out of him. But I got to tell you, Vic, in watching Georgiev, he left the Rangers. They traded for him. I thought it was a great move. Darcy Kemper had won the Stanley Cup for them that year. He left as a free agent, and they trade for Georgiev, who looked like the only reason he wasn't a number one in the league was because he was behind Shesterkin. I don't think he's ever lived up to the billing that we thought that he had going to Denver. I don't. It seems whenever the playoffs come around, important games come around, he's just never that as good as we thought he was going to be.
Yeah, but was it really his undoing that led to the Avalanche going out against the Dallas Stars last year? I don't think so. I thought he played relatively well. So, there's been talk that maybe there's some stuff going on there behind the scenes that we're not privy to. And again, there is time and a lot of time to get this straightened out. And, we'll just have to wait and see how this comes. But
and they will straighten it out. I mean, you can't have a team with McKinnon and Makar and all the rest of Rantanen and so on and so forth and not get it straightened out. I mean, if Edmonton could straighten out the mess they were in last year, Colorado can straighten this out. I do want to add something about Edmonton, if I can go back to that for a minute, because we all worried about the Edmonton losing, not having the defense that they had even last year, and when they weren't stellar on defense. But boy, when you watch them play Calgary, they are defensively inept. Those forwards, McDavid did a flyby on one goal. Zach Hyman couldn't handle the guy in front of the net on another goal. They're really going to have to button that team down because they looked really poor defensively in that game with Calgary.
And the Oilers will play their fourth consecutive home game to open the season when they welcome another hardworking club in the Philadelphia Flyers on Tuesday night. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce the majority owner of the Allen Americans of the ECHL and also minor league affiliate for the Utah Hockey Club, LaSonjia Jack. And LaSonjia, before we get going, just want to share with you that Neil and I have been doing this podcast since January, and we have had NHL execs, GMs, coaches, Hall of Famers, broadcasters. You are our very first owner.
Wow, I love it. And I'm excited to be here with you two.
And before we hand the first question over to you, just want to acknowledge that you were a recent honoree at the Pink Awards, and congratulations to you for the work that you have done with breast cancer awareness.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I am an advocate for what I call early detection, and that's for both men and women. So if you have, any signs of cancer, in your family on the paternal or maternal side of the house, most definitely go get that checked out. I think it's important.
And should be well heeded by everyone. Wanted to ask you about the ownership piece that you have with the Allen Americans, and your son, who is the co-owner, former NFL linebacker Myles Jack, obviously known for his work on the football field. And you come from a background where you have had a lot of corporate success. You're an entrepreneur, an author, a speaker. So two very different backgrounds. So can you take us on the path that the two of you came together that led you to becoming majority owners of Allen, and that took place just about a year ago?
Yeah, absolutely. October of last year. So here's the beauty of it. I am LJ when we talk business, and I'm mom when he needs to know how to put seasoning on his salmon. So let's start there first. So the great news about it is because I've been in corporate America, mostly operations and telecommunications, marketing background, I found that, hey, you know what? I have kids that play sports. So Myles, who's a linebacker, and then I have Jalen, actually a senior point guard, shooting guard, 6'4", at Fort Valley University. So with sports, I always wanted them to understand the business side of it. In fact, so that we watch Shark Tank. So they call me like Mama Sports Shark Tank, to say, hey, you know, you hear a lot of different businesses, fitness equipment, you know, gyms. There's all kind of different things that go on there that are sports related. So when we had the opportunity to say, hey, can we be a sports owner? We hurried up and, you know, jumped at it. And it all started almost about 5 years ago with Myles being a linebacker at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And a friend of mine called me and said, hey, LJ, there's someone who's going to have a new team, the Jacksonville Icemen. Would you be interested in listening about ownership? And I said, absolutely. So had the opportunity to go sit down with Sawyer Sports and fell in love with the idea. I'm from Evanston, Illinois. So, you know, you're talking about the Bears. You talk about Michael Jordan. I ice skated on the weekend, roller skates, been to a hockey game, you know, for our, what I call our high school field trip. So I was ready. I was like, let's do this. And had the opportunity to sit down with Myles, and he was like, that sounds interesting, Mom. Let's try it. So that's how we first, you know, got the idea of, you know, this would be important to us.
So, LJ, did you own part of the Jacksonville team before the Allen team, or do you still have a part of it?
I still do. In fact, you're going to love this story. Not only are we a percentage owner of the Jacksonville Icemen, but the Savannah Ghost Pirates, the Tahoe Night Monsters with Tim Tebow, and the AHL team, the Charlotte Checkers. That happened about 45 days ago as well. And then we have soccer with Leeds overseas with Michael Phelps, as well as with top tier sports. There's a rugby team and a baseball team and a lacrosse team. So we're all in now. This is like 5 years later.
Well, that's amazing. I was an ECHL owner for quite a long time. Had one of the original franchises in the ECHL, which was the Johnstown Chiefs. I moved them in 2010 to Greenville, South Carolina, which is only 90 miles from Charlotte, by the way. And they're still here. The Greenville team is, although I have no ownership in it. So I do understand the ups and downs of minor league ownership. And as they sometimes will say, that the best way to make a large fortune in minor league sports is the best way to make a small fortune in minor league sports is to start with a large fortune, because it's a tough racket. So, I know you're early into trying to put this whole almost mini conglomerate together, but how are you seeing it from a business standpoint so far? I know there can be calls for money from different teams at times and stuff, but are you guys managing okay?
Actually, we're doing a fabulous job. So here's the good news story. When they came to us and say, hey, there's an opportunity for you to majority own a team, we originally thought it would happen in 2025, 2026, because we figured Myles will be retiring. And then I may retire from, you know, my role. So we thought it'll be in the future. So it came quickly. Literally, we had to make a decision at a moment's notice and decided, hey, but guess what we loved? Allen, the city, the community. So once we found out about the people there and how they cared about the sport of hockey, we were like, this is great. And then the leadership. So we have our president there, currently, Johnny Gaudreau. He's been there 4 years. We got an opportunity to sit down with him. He talked about the staff, the facility, and just the love of, establishing what we call a great family entertainment. So when all those things kind of came together, we said, let's put a plan in place. So we understood that the first year, operationally, literally October 3rd was our announcement. They were on the ice in 2 weeks. So we decided that in our business plan, in which we were smart, 2 years. Give us 2 years operationally, funding with our other investors to make sure that we have enough time to do this the right way. I have 25 years of operational experience from Microsoft, Cox Communication, AT&T, and T-Mobile. So I know how to put a plan together. And we decided that we'll go in the first year, look at everything, make changes that are appropriate for us, last year we increased in merchandise sales. Season ticket membership was up. We were also up in group sales. And most importantly, we had like 8 massive sellout games that they hadn't had previous to us. So we're on the right track, I would think. And so that's why I think we're ready. We make sure that we plan. And last year was I call it a development year. And this is our really year one this year.
Well, that sounds like a great plan. I got to ask, though, about the challenges of owning a team in a market that has, you're in the Dallas Stars territory, the Texas Stars territory. Maybe you'd like to explain what I already know, which is ECHL hockey is family entertainment, whereas the Dallas Stars, and to a lesser extent, it's all about winning and losing. And can you explain that to the listeners? Because I think that's a vital piece of owning a AA hockey team as opposed to American League or NHL.
Absolutely. So first of all, if you just look at the comparison, high level, yes, Dallas Stars, which I know those individuals over there, you're going to pay a little bit more higher price, most definitely, to take a family of 4. And still people love hockey, so we're affordable. We're affordable entertainment. Lesser costs, but you get the same, great experience of our players on the ice and that entertainment. But there is a difference. And also with making sure that people know who we are. We're Allen Americans, but I'm going to call us your North Texas hockey team. So that way people from all areas outside of Dallas can still come down and enjoy, what we call a weekend. So, nothing against movies because I love them. Nothing against going to, play golf. I like golf too, but to come down and spend the weekends with us, give you an example. We have some fabulous things as the Texas Rangers. So let's talk about baseball. What we did last year is we had baseball meets hockey. So my marketing team is Rev Entertainment, which is part of the Texas Rangers marketing team. And they partner with me to expand our knowledge. So this year, in fact, let me look here. I'm Texas Rangers tonight, November 16th. So once again, we're going to bring baseball to hockey, and all of those fans are coming. And I'm going to let a little secret out. We got this cool jersey, this kind of hockey, kind of baseball related that's going to come out for the fans. You didn't hear from me, but I'm going to tell you now. And, this is a way that we have baseball music. We have hot dogs. We have take me out to the ball game. We have Texas Rangers alumni in the house and their announcers. And we're just going to have a fabulous night. It's actually going to be cool. And then we're going to go to the Texas Rangers facility during baseball and talk a little bit about hockey to the fans. So a little cross-pollination in Dallas. So yeah, there's other sports, but we're working with them. We're going to partner with them to let them know we're there.
I think your enthusiasm is fabulous. And I know, for Myles, he's no stranger to the speed, power, and violence that the NFL and, by extension, the NHL has. For you, what drew you to hockey?
You know what? I think it was just the love and the speed on the ice. When I sit down there and those players are jumping in and out of the box and giving their all. I mean, we have players who, have some experience, and we have some new players. We just got a couple of new players I just saw released the other day, from Utah. It's just excitement on the players. I mean, they're there to win. So let me tell you, having boys in sports, I'm a sports freak myself. We're the household growing up that would have 2 TVs up. One so they can play video game sports, and the other one so we can watch real sports at the same time. So I'm the mom that had to walk through and watch everything all the time. And growing up, was a cheerleader. So I did it for the basketball team. I was on the dance team. So I know what it takes to work really hard, and our players work extremely hard. They want to get noticed. They want to win for us. Some of them want to go up to the NHL or the AHL. So I think what's most important to me is watching the evolution of our players, the growth. Some of them come in there new, and by the end of the season, they've learned a lot, and some of them have moved on. I spent last year at the end of the season having a one-on-one with every single player, every single one. And being an NFL sports mom, a basketball mom, I know how important that is to listen to your players, making sure they understand, the physical side and the mental side of it. So I have firsthand knowledge of what that looks like. So I'm kind of like a mama hockey mom. So the player, of all the guys there.
Well, you have had now so much experience with not only the partial ownership with some teams, but now as a majority owner. What are your longer term aspirations? Do you want to get involved with the NHL? Do you want to get into other leagues beyond what you're already in?
So I say more hockey. Most definitely. And I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to sit at the table in New York with some NHL counterparts. I got to meet the commissioner. And what they're doing is they're bringing people together to talk about the future of hockey as we lead up to the 2026 Special Olympics, as we lead up to the 2026 Special Olympics in Milan. So what does that look like? How do we partner together? How do we get more messages out about the importance of hockey and getting our youth on the ice? I think that's really important. So we have to start somewhere. We currently do not have a brand new camp, but with our new coach, BJ Adams, we're going to start a nice youth hockey training camp in the summer to get more kids on the ice. And that's one of the plans that I told them in our conference for the NHL. So the future, I could see us having an NHL team. I wouldn't be opposed to being a partnership in that.
LJ, this has been so insightful for both Neil and me, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning. And I want to remind your fans that you've got the Red Out at the Credit Union of Texas Event Center coming up on Friday, October 25th against Kansas City. That'll be the home opener. So we wish you and Miles and the entire Allen Americans organization all the best in the 2024-25 season and beyond.
Well, thank you, Vic and Neil. This has been absolutely wonderful. And we would love to come back and at the end of the season when we kick some butt and win some games.
How about, LJ, how about if we do NHL Wraparound from a game with the Allen Americans? That'd be fun to be down in Texas and do the show from there.
Oh, come on down. I'm inviting you guys one-on-one. Come to our suite. We're going to hang out and let's do the show live there. It would be absolutely fabulous. Come meet some of our players.
All right.
Deal.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And see you guys. And go Americans.
And Neil, LJ was just such a fabulous guest, and she's actually got a book that is hot off the presses, The LJ Way, The Roadmap to Your Journey from Poverty to Plenty. And again, it has just been released, will likely be a fabulous read. And also, podcast with our buddy Lee Elias, Our Kids Play Hockey. We'll also be doing an interview with LJ and hopefully with her son Miles as well. They'll be talking team building and leadership and just a couple of other housekeeping items. Our website, NHLWraparound.com. And very important to us, Neil, that starting on Wednesday of this week, we are going to be introducing short shifts where we will be on twice a week discussing what's been happening in the NHL, looking ahead, and I think it just gives us a greater opportunity to really bridge between the two main wraparound shows and keep hockey fans even more informed than hopefully they've already been.
And, when you're in the game and you're coming down to the wire, you tell each other, shorten your shift, have a lot of energy for your shift. So that's why the name is Short Shifts.
They're short shifts, but in a way, we are expanding our content. So that's a perfect segue into expansion. And this is a big talk around the NHL right now. And there are some really different schools of thought here. So I'm going to go into a pretty long preamble just to set you up for your opinion. But you remember back in April, we had Bill Daly on, and he was stating the case for why the NHL would want to expand. And there are several markets that are out there right now. But the case that he was making is that there are only 22 actual markets in the NHL when you consider there are 7 Canadian teams, there are 3 teams in the New York market, and there are 2 teams in the LA market with the Kings and the Ducks. So let's go through a little bit of history to kind of set this up. That after the NHL doubled in 1967, 6 more teams were added between 1970 and 74. And the league kind of watered down at that point, leading into the Montreal Canadiens dynasty of the late 1970s. And, particularly the 76-77 season where they went 60 wins, 8 losses, and 12 ties. But the league was pretty watered down at that point because it was made up mostly of Canadian-born players. And then during the 70s, we did start to see an increased presence of Americans and Swedes. And then Czechs and Finns started to come in during the 80s. And then the Russian influx began in the late 80s. So, of course, over time, the talent did manage to catch up to the number of teams in the NHL. But at this point, with the league thinking of expanding, Neil, do we truly have enough NHL-level players that we don't wind up falling into what we were in with the league watered down, say, about 50 or so years ago?
Yeah, I'm concerned that if the league expands any more than it already is, they're going to be an even worse situation for highly talented players and the lack thereof of high-end players. So if you're a first-round pick or a high first-round pick, you're going to start to be able to dictate where you want to play. And we've already seen a little bit of that in the league so far, where players say, well, I don't want to go there, and the club has to end up trading him somewhere else. He hasn't even been in the league yet. And you're also going to see these mammoth contracts that they have now, 8 years at 8.25 for a guy going into his 3rd year of his career. He's already being handed that. I think right now there aren't enough high-end players to threaten the other high-end players that if they don't play ball, meaning with the clubs, with the management, there's nobody there to replace them. So it's basically they're in the driver's seat. And I think the more teams that they put into the league, the more the players, high-end players, that is, will be in the driver's seat.
But it's also a delicate balance for the NHL because revenues are at an all-time high. You want to expand the game. So from the league perspective, I could see it. But, as fans, will they notice if there is not quite the high level of play because there just aren't enough top-end players to go around?
Yeah, well, and the other argument against expanding that I've heard this from some of my buddies is, you're at 32 now, which means if everybody was doing averages, you win the cup every 32 years. That obviously isn't the case because we have some teams that win it, that are always up at the top and some teams that are always down at the bottom. However, having said that, You go to 33 or 34 or 35, it's just going to dilute your chances of really getting to the Holy Grail, the Stanley Cup. You're going to go and cheer like crazy, but do you really have a chance to win the Stanley Cup? And also, how many teams are going to make the playoffs? Right now, you've only got 50% of the league makes the playoffs, and 50% misses the playoffs, which means every year, 50% of the fan base is pissed off because their team didn't make the playoffs. That's 16 teams. So, I guess there's arguments to expand because of the fact that it's great an amount of money. If you're charging $1 billion for a franchise, that's a lot of money to each of the current 32 teams, owners. But there's a lot of hockey arguments, I think, against more expansion.
There, in the all-time registry, there are 46 countries that have provided players to the NHL and 9 former countries and territories. Do you see the growth worldwide eventually delivering enough players that you could say, okay, you know what, expanding the league will make sense? I guess so.
I mean, I think that and hockey is definitely developing around the world. It's developing in the United States and in Canada. We're seeing players come from all the different states in the United States coming through now and being able to play NHL hockey. I'm sure it's growing in Sweden and in Finland and in Russia and the Czech Republic and Germany and Switzerland, and we can go on. We have some very high-end Swiss players now. As you know, Roman Josi, the captain of Nashville, being an excellent player, and he is a Swiss descent. So, I think it's going to continue to grow in these other countries. I just think that we got to be careful here, or if in fact the issue is to try to win the Stanley Cup, it's going to be pretty hard. It's hard enough in a 32-team league to get to the playoffs and then to advance in the playoffs. It's going to be really difficult the more teams that get put into the league.
Absolutely. And of course, it certainly helps you appreciate even more what the Tampa Bay Lightning did in 20 and 21. And then before that, the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2016 and 2017. So I want to just change topics here because Igor Shesterkin's contract, or lack thereof with him extending with the New York Rangers, is a major topic right now. He just turned down 8 years at $11 million per. And the interesting piece here is that we've just seen Jeremy Swayman re-up with the Boston Bruins for 8 years at $8.25 per year, total package of $66 million. And Linus Ullmark for half that with the Ottawa Senators, which intrigues me because when the trade was made to move him to Ottawa, I think a lot of people thought that he was going to be one and done and then test the market. So he winds up extending with the Senators. But where I'm going to go with this, Neil, is let's look at the last 4 cup-winning goaltenders and what they were paid in their championship years. So we mentioned Andrei Vasilevsky. He made $3.5 million in 2020, and then up that by $6 million to $9.5 million in 2021. Darcy Kemper, winning with the Colorado Avalanche, made $4.5 million in 22. Adin Hill, $2.175 in 23, and then Sergei Bobrovsky making $10 million last year. So the question here is, if you look at these 4 goaltenders, 2 are making on the higher end, 2 are making somewhat at the lower end. Igor Shesterkin has not won a Stanley Cup. He's gotten within 6 games in 2 out of the last 3 seasons. So how do you justify him asking for $12 or $13 million?
I just think it's justified by the agent and the player in saying, I'm the best goalie in the league, and my numbers back it up. And if you don't give me what I want, then I'm going to become a free agent and go somewhere else where they will give it to me. I don't think that, that they're necessarily going to have to listen to these comparisons because, again, he's a one of a kind, and I'm sure there's lots of teams that would love to have him on their team. And the threat that he hangs over the New York Rangers, or will hang over them, is that I'll leave and get it someplace else. The same as Swayman waited and saw the Boston Bruins trade Ullmark, and then was the only goalie that could take that role. Because they brought in Korpisalo, but everybody knew he was brought in as a backup, not as a number one. And so Jeremy Swayman basically said, you give me what I want or I'm not coming back. And even the Boston Bruins, who have been frugal throughout their years, had to knuckle under and give Swayman pretty much what he wanted. So, again, Vic, we've talked about this. If the goaltender takes 13, 14, 12 million, that's a lot of money to take out of the salary cap and then try to build a really good competitive Stanley Cup contender around him. And, why have a goalie like that if that's not what you're trying to do? You're trying to win the Stanley Cup, and you've got to build a complete team, not just a goaltender.
The salary cap this year is $88 million, and the Rangers saw fit to offer $11 million. There is talk that the cap will go up to 92.5 next year, an increase of 4.5 million. A lot of people seem to think that 12 million will get it done. So is this just a matter perhaps of Shesterkin saying, you know what, I want to wait until this is confirmed and then I'll agree to it? And just a little piece of research here. The confirmation of the cap going up for 24-25 came over on June 8th of last season. So that was about 23 days before official free agency kicked in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be up to the Rangers again if he's going to say, well, just, let's assume the cap's going up, so pay me as if the cap's going up. And the Rangers could say, well, we don't know that the cap's going up until it's announced. But the Rangers can't afford to let him get to June 8th when it's only 3 weeks from him being a total free agent. And yet, if I were them, I wouldn't like the fact that he's saying, well, just trust me, it is going up, just trust me. And so it's this is part of the salary cap era that I never dealt with, but it must be very difficult for these teams to deal with now.
Certainly, Shesterkin is really investing in himself here because let's just say perhaps that the Rangers make the playoffs and they go out in the first or second round. Then the pendulum switches back to the team.
I don't know, Vic, if it does, because Shesterkin could say, well, look at my numbers during the season. It's not my fault that we went out. You can't totally blame me that we went out in the first round. I'm not sure that even matters to these guys anymore. I don't know that team success it's definitely not being used by the clubs as a negotiating tool like it used to be. Now it's all on individual production. And if the team loses early or the team doesn't make the playoffs, I score 50 goals, but my team missed the playoffs. Well, I still should get what a 50 goal scorer gets. Well, that's not the way it used to be. It used to be if you got 50 goals on a non-playoff team, what good were your 50 goals? What good did it do us? We didn't make the playoffs. It's not that way anymore.
It almost feels like, these guys are making more money than they could possibly spend. And it feels as if these dollar figures, it's more about status than it is about money. Almost.
It's always been that way. It's always been in the locker room. Your salary was your evaluation by the club of where you stood within the club. So even when it was down at let's say $300,000 for a 30 goal scorer, I remember in the early 90s saying, if you score 30 goals, you'll make around 300,000. And then, then the guy that scores 20 might make 200,000. And they didn't need that much money back then, but it was all about status within the game. And in reality, these guys have got to use this money for the rest of their life after their career is over. If their career ends when they're 35, they've got another, 60 years to go, hopefully, to live to use that money.
Well, and hopefully they also broaden themselves and prepare themselves for life after hockey, and that they can apply some different skill sets to some different areas once their playing career is done. And this is the human side of the story. And Neil, tributes continuing around the NHL for Johnny Gaudreau as the first weekend of the NHL season passes, from moments of silence in some buildings to moments of celebration in others. And certainly no larger celebration of Johnny Gaudreau than in his former haunts where he played in Calgary for many seasons.
Yeah, and that's where he started his NHL career. The Calgary Flames taking a chance on this little guy from New Jersey, and him turning into a star with the Calgary Flames, and certainly gave them a lot of moments of celebration when he played for that team. What I thought was really great was the theme song that they played in the building when he played there, which was "Go Johnny Go." They played that and celebrated Johnny Gaudreau rather than just mourning and being a sad time. They also celebrated that they at least got to have Johnny Gaudreau for those years, and that they were blessed to have had him there. And that's often when you're grieving something, you might want to turn it and say, yes, I'm sad that he's gone, but I am blessed to have known him. And I think that's what the fans in Calgary were saying with that. We had quite a few other things go on around the league that were very special. Cole Caulfield changed his number to number 13 from 22 on the Montreal Canadiens because he grew up emulating Johnny Gaudreau. And then as the things would have it, he scored the first goal of the Montreal Canadiens season this year, did that number 13. So that was another great tribute. One of the things that we saw in the game that Columbus was playing when they were ready to win the game, Kirill Marchenko had a chance to just walk right into the crease and score an empty net goal to salt the game away. But he passed it over to Sean Monahan to get his first goal as a Columbus Blue Jacket. And I don't know if they thought about it at the moment they were doing it, but I thought that being that Sean Monahan was best friends with Johnny Gaudreau, signed with Columbus because he wanted to play with him again the way they had played in Calgary, I thought that was a great symbol, intended or unintended. That was a great symbol to Johnny Gaudreau. So there was a lot of wonderful things go on. Unfortunately, in hockey, like in every other walk of life, we have tragedies strike us from time to time. And I think this tragedy, albeit as horrible as it is, has been celebrated and done in a very fine way throughout the league.
Absolutely. And we should forget Flames goaltender Dustin Wolf on the back of his head plate has an image of Gaudreau painted on his mask. So just another wonderful tribute. And finally, the Columbus Blue Jackets will get their opportunity to honor Gaudreau Tuesday when they host the Florida Panthers. And that will wrap up this edition of NHL Wraparound. Thanks so much to LaSonjia Jack, the majority owner of the Allen Americans of the ECHL, for joining us today. Thanks to our listeners. Send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com. Don't forget our website, nhlwraparound.com. And finally, our weekly wraparound short shifts begin this Wednesday, and we'll look to be doing these probably twice weekly throughout the season with more immediate, in-depth coverage from around the National Hockey League. On behalf of Neil, I'm Vic. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.